Look at the title, please. We must plunge immediately into the most painful reality of our emotional lives. You depend utterly on another for security. This is not a romantic statement. It is not an invitation to sentimentality. It is a diagnosis of a psychological disease that affects every single human being on this earth, regardless of culture or wealth. If you look at this fact clearly, the entire structure of what we call relationship and love collapses, and something entirely different, something true and terrifyingly beautiful, may begin. We are not going to talk about social or financial dependence, which are obvious necessities of organized living. We are talking about the psychological investment. What does this desperate psychological dependence mean? It means that into this one person, your spouse, your partner, your friend, your guru, you have invested the entirety of your hopes, your cravings, your demands, your expectations. You are using the other human being as a psychological fortress, a protective barrier against your own terrifying internal emptiness. Why? Why this addiction to reliance? Because dependence gives you comfort. It gives you a sense of togetherness. You are no longer lost. You are no longer afraid to be utterly alone. You are no longer consumed by the crushing terror of loneliness, of being a nobody. For all these desperate reasons, you cling like a drowning man to a fragile piece of driftwood. And this clinging, this bargaining, this complex arrangement of emotional extortion is what we have shamelessly labeled love. Don't forget to leave us a like, subscribe for more content, and tell us in the comments, what topic would you most like to see us cover next? But is it love? Can there be love where there is fear? Can there be love where there is demand? Can there be love where there is utilization? No. Love is not a marketable commodity exchanged for security. This relationship built upon mutual dependence is not love. It is the very battlefield of human conflict and psychological slavery. The unwanted freedom, the paradox of human desire. The conflict is not external. It is rooted in an unbearable internal division. We are torn between two opposing facts. The inner fact, the truth, deeply, profoundly, inwardly, we know there is no such thing as permanent psychological security in another human being. Everything changes, everything ends. The clinging, the non-fact. We cling desperately to the illusion of permanence, to the desire for comfort, for the continuation of pleasure and security. Our misery, the conflict that makes our lives a constant series of arguments, jealousies, and subtle cruelties, is this struggle between the fact that we perceive and the illusion we hold on to. We are so deeply uncertain, so lost, confused, and lonely that we clutch onto the other person to avoid facing that frightening emptiness within. Now look at the tremendous paradox of this situation. When you observe and realize, with the clarity of a shock to the system, that there is no security, that your hopes and demands invested in the other are inherently doomed to failure, that realization is in itself freedom. Do you understand the revolutionary nature of that realization? But here is the shocking reality. We do not want freedom. We would rather endure the familiar state of slavery than the terrifying uncertainty of total psychological freedom. We prefer the known chains, the predictable misery, the comfortable routine of conflict, to the immense unknown energy of a mind that is truly free and alone. This preference for slavery is the result of our conditioning. We have been programmed by 1,000,000 years of survival mechanisms to seek the known, the certain, the secure. And the end of psychological security feels like the end of the self. The dissection of fear, the mechanism of thought. So how do we bring about the cessation of this internal division, this conflict between what we know to be true and what we desperately cling to? We must look at the central force that binds us to dependence. Fear. The fear of being lonely. The fear of losing your partner. The fear of facing your own utter emptiness. The fear of uncertainty. These fears are the chains. They are the psychological glue that holds the dependency structure together. But how do you observe this fear? We are surrounded by fears. The fear of pain, the fear of old age, the fear of death, the fear of social failure, the fear of not being loved. But what is the root, the very origin of these psychological fears? They spring from the structure of thought. Thought and the past. Thought feeds on what happened yesterday. It recalls a past psychological hurt, a moment of loneliness, a moment of deep sorrow, and not wanting that pain to recur, it generates the fear of that recurrence tomorrow. Thought and the future. Thought establishes a comfortable security, your dependence on your partner, and then immediately projects the possibility of its disturbance. Any threat to this established comfort is met with the resistance of fear. Thought breeds fear. It is the ceaseless rumination on the past incident and the projection of that danger into the future that constitutes the substance of psychological fear. But be very careful. Thought is responsible for fear just as it is responsible for pleasure. When you experience delight, a beautiful relationship, a profound moment of connection, thought instantly reflects on it, wants it to be sustained, wants it to be repeated, to be permanent. And when permanence is impossible, when change is inevitable, that gap creates anxiety, resentment, and fear. Pleasure and fear are inseparable twins. They are both products of psychological time, which is the movement of thought. If there were no tomorrow for the thought to project onto, neither the fear of loss nor the craving for pleasure would exist psychologically. You must discover this reality for yourself. Do not accept the speaker's words. Be absolutely sure, through your own direct observation, that thought is the very origin of psychological fear, and consequently, of dependence. Don't forget to leave us a like, subscribe for more content, and tell us in the comments, what topic would you most like to see us cover next? The freedom of the eagle, rejecting authority, and embracing learning. If thought creates the addiction of dependence and the prison of fear, then the only escape is not to follow any path or system, but to seek total psychological freedom, the freedom of the unconditioned mind. Without this freedom, you cannot see what is true, because fear distorts, conditions, and makes you incapable of genuine perception. But how is this freedom possible for a mind so heavily conditioned by culture, society, religious promises, and its own fears? It is possible only through one radical act, the total rejection of spiritual authority. The speaker here has no authority. I am neither teacher nor guru. Why? Because the moment you accept an authority in this field, you destroy yourself and you destroy the teacher. Following another destroys your own clarity, your own integrity, your own capacity for inquiry. The motive of the follower is always reward, comfort, security, enlightenment, and truth is not a reward. We are taking a journey together. There is no guide ahead of you. You must become a light unto yourself. To inquire into fear and dependence, we need not only freedom, but the immense discipline required for observation. But this discipline is not what the world calls discipline: conforming, imitating, suppressing, or following a model. Discipline, from its root, means to learn. Learning and freedom are intrinsically linked. You can only learn about yourself if you are free from the pressure to become something else. To learn, you must observe not according to a concept or an ideal, but observe exactly what is. This very act of observation, this intense seeing, brings its own discipline, its own learning, without the need for control, suppression, or coercion. That is where an extraordinary energy and a quiet beauty reside. When the mind is free from the crushing weight of fear and dependence, you become a light unto yourself, a light that has no dependency on the external validation of another. This is the beauty of the free mind. It leaves no mark, The eagle in its flight leaves no trace in the sky. The revolution of total attention, ending the self. How then does this heavily conditioned mind, burdened with fear and attachment, achieve this liberation? How do we put a complete end to this psychological slavery? It is not through effort, for all struggle, distorts the mind and prolongs the conflict. You must observe the fear, not with the motive to avoid it or escape from it, but to be fully and completely aware of the fear in which you are trapped. It is not about generating courage. It is about looking at the fact of the fear. To observe fear with ultimate intimacy, you must take the radical leap where the observer is the observed. As long as you stand separate from your fear and say, I, Chwaibi, the observer, am afraid of this thing, the fear, you maintain the division, and thus the continuity of the conflict. The observer is merely a bundle of past memories, judgments, and intentions, and that observer is itself the product of fear and thought. When the observer and the observed merge, when there is only the energy of fear, not my fear, then there is no center left to accumulate fear or to cling to dependence. There is no me desperately seeking security. There is only the fact of the energetic state. And in that total, undivided observation, the energy of the fear exhausts itself immediately. This is the ending of the need to depend on another for psychological security. When there is no fear, there is no dependence. And without fear, there is no love in the sense of attachment and bargaining, but a state entirely different, a state of unconditioned energy that is not bound by time. This is why our inquiry must continue. Can we live with a mind that is absolutely free, without the psychological mark of fear and dependence, so that we may see for ourselves what lies beyond the confusion of time?